Senator Rob Portman of Ohio is a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He's joining us live from Capitol Hill. Senator, thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me on.
So what's your reaction to President Trump blaming the Republican-led House, the Republican-led Senate, your colleagues in Congress for this troubled relationship right now with Russia?
Well, we have a difference of opinion. Many of us, including me, believe that Russia is continuing to destabilize democracies around the world, that they did meddle in our election. I think that's pretty well the conventional wisdom now, and so they need to be held account for that. And to have a good relationship with Russia is something important to us. We have some things in common, including fighting Islamic extremism, and we should be working better together on that. But we can only do so if it's an honest relationship and one that's consistent with the values that we hold dear, including not getting involved in other countries' elections, not actually, in the case of Crimea, taking another country's land, and that's what the sanctions are about. I think if the Russians don't feel that there are any consequences to this kind of activity, that they continue to do it. So we want to have a good relationship, but it's got to be based on honesty and following the rules of the road.
Like almost everyone else in Washington, Democrats and Republicans, you blame the Russians for this very bad relationship right now. Everyone except the president, he blames the Republican-led Congress, and he doesn't say anything at all about the Russians, what they're doing. There is a thunderous silence, as some have called it, from the president as far as Putin and the Russians are concerned. You met with President Trump yesterday at the White House. Why is that?
Well, we didn't talk about Russia. We talked about opioids, where he's taken a strong stand, and I appreciate what he has done with regard to fighting back against what you talked about earlier, which is unfortunately an epidemic now around our country. With regard to Russia, again, we want to have a good relationship with them. We should be working together on a lot of things together, including in the Middle East, including fighting back against terrorism and violent extremism. But it's got to be based on the kind of terms that America has always insisted on. So, by the way, I don't think our relationship with Russia is as bad as it was at the height of the Cold War. I mean, I think we have communication with them. We are working with them. We have established the ability to actually have some decent dialogue on some issues, including, again, pushing back against terrorism. So, but it's got to be done on a basis that is honest, and where we are holding them to account for the things they're doing that are affecting us and other democracies. If you look at what they've done, Wolf, in Europe, whether it's Germany or France or the UK, certainly what they're doing in eastern border of Ukraine, as we talk today, where they're again building up forces there and causing more instability in that country, a country that has turned to us and the West. We need to hold them accountable for that, and that's what these sanctions are about, and I think they're appropriate.
But what's curious, Senator, we hear what you're saying, so many others are saying, Democrats and Republicans. We hear it from the Vice President, the Secretary of State, the National Security. We don't hear it from the President. Let me repeat the question, why?
Well, I think he wants to have a better relationship with a major superpower, and that's understandable. And I understand his frustration that has not been able to be accomplished. And let's face it, the Bush administration tried and was not terribly successful. The Obama administration tried. They pushed the so-called reset button. They were not terribly successful. So he had hoped that he would be able to break through and to be able to have the kind of relationship with Russia that would be constructive for both countries. That's very difficult to do when Russia continues to act in the way that they have, in a destabilizing way, an aggressive way, not just, again, here in our elections, but around the world. One of the issues that we are confronted with today is the fact that the State Department has the ability to use about $60 million in funds to be able to push back against some of the disinformation that Russia puts out. And apparently the State Department is hesitant to do that right now. This is an example where there is a bipartisan consensus, where I would think the President and his people would be very eager to be able to up our game, particularly online, to be able to ensure that America is taking the lead around the world and pushing back against false information, disinformation, that is, again, destabilizing, particularly in some of these fledgling democracies. So, we just have a difference of opinion, I guess, in how to approach it. I think we have the same objective, and I understand the president's frustration. We'd all like to have a better relationship with Russia, but it requires them to change their behavior, and that's what these sanctions are about.
You co-sponsored the legislation to provide, $60 and maybe $80 million to the State Department to fight Russian propaganda, ISIS propaganda. They're not spending it. You said in your statement, you said countering foreign propaganda should be a top priority, and it is very concerning that progress on combating this problem is being delayed because the State Department isn't tapping into these resources. I assume you've raised this issue with State Department officials, maybe with the Secretary of State, maybe with the President. Why are they not using this money to fight Russian and ISIS propaganda?
Well, I have raised it. In fact, we had a hearing a couple weeks ago on this where I was able to talk to the Deputy Secretary of State specifically about this issue, and he indicated that this was one of the Secretary's priorities, that they wanted to, provide the funding. I think part of the issue, frankly, Wolf, is they have had a tough time getting up and going at the State Department, partly because they don't have nominees who have been confirmed in political positions, including with regard to this one area of pushing back on disinformation. So my hope is it's just a matter of time until they get people in place and can begin to focus on this issue. We traditionally, in the United States, have assumed that other countries are sort of playing fair on this, and at the same time, Russia has been spending more and more money and more resources, particularly online, with effective disinformation campaigns, not just here in this country, but around the world. In fact, even more so with regard to Eastern European countries, the Baltic countries as an example. And we do need to push back, and we need to be helpful to other countries as they try to push back.
Before I let you go, I know you're helping to lead the bipartisan effort right now behind a bill to combat sex trafficking and to crack down on websites that promote it. Tell us about this legislation.
Well, it's very simple. We're trying to keep girls and women from being exploited online. Sex trafficking has exploded in this country, we are told. All the data indicates that. And I think the reason is pretty clear, which is it's moved, as victims of sex trafficking have told me, from the street corner to the smartphone. And this means that we need to go after some of these websites that have been brazenly selling girls and women online. They've had an immunity based on the court cases that have been brought against them, the prosecutions against them. They have had an immunity that they've been hiding behind in federal law. So our legislation is very simple. It just removes that immunity in a very targeted, direct way that says if you knowingly facilitate sex trafficking, that you cannot hide behind this immunity. And it essentially takes the federal law that already exists against sex trafficking and puts it clearly in place with regard to these websites. The one that's most offensive, the one that is promoting most of this, is called Backpage.com. And so we spent 2 years investigating this organization. We found out they were knowingly, again, selling girls and women online illegally. And we just need to have a way to be able to allow victims to be able to get the justice they deserve, and to allow the prosecutors around the country, including the state attorneys general, 47 of whom have asked for us to make this change, including the Department of Justice, to be able to go after some of these despicable websites that are engaged in this sex trafficking.
Senator Portman, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. And by the way, the Trump administration has been very supportive of that effort, and I appreciate that as well.
All right. Well, good luck. It's an important issue that you're dealing with. Thanks so much for doing that. Thanks for joining us once again.